The Kenya Kwanza government played very smart yesterday, and the police played very smart. They kept Kenyans away from accessing the CBD. They blocked all entry points into the CBD. They blocked Raila Odinga and Azimio from accessing the CBD very successfully. Of course, that move was very unconstitutional, because our constitution, enshrined in our 2010 constitution, is freedom of movement, freedom of association, picketing is allowed, you can protest, air your views, etc., etc. But let us put aside our constitutional rights for a minute and continue to analyze what happened after this. Very many Kenyans, despite all this, were able to access the CBD, and there were demonstrations within the Central Business District of Nairobi. Admittedly, the crowds were not as large as they would have been had the police not blocked people from entering the CBD. Very clearly, Kenyans are very determined. For people to force their way into the CBD, those are very determined people. Yeah? Determined to do what? Determined to prove what? Hold on to that thought. It will become obvious in a little while. In the efforts of the police to block wananchi from even leaving their homes, in slum areas like Kibra, Mathare, etc., etc., they were running battles that resulted with the police. And very interestingly, and very instructive, in a lot of these battles, the police were not able to withstand the numbers, the sheer numbers of determined Kenyans. There were instances where the police were outnumbered and had to run for dear life away from the wananchi. In one very hilarious encounter, police in a vehicle were forced to shout the Azimio slogan, "Ruto must go." They were forced to do this so as to enable the huge crowd, hostile crowd, to allow their vehicle through unscathed. It was more than hilarious. Cops chanting, "Ruto must go. Ruto must go." Now, after Raila Odinga was completely unable to access the CBD, blocked by the police, his convoy with the other leaders snaked around the CBD and went to the Isli Juja Road area, where they addressed very enthusiastic and determined Kenyans in some very memorable speeches, which are available online. And Raila announced that the demonstrations will now continue every single Monday without fail. In other words, every Monday going forward will be a public holiday, as per Raila Odinga Gazette notice. Now, of course, this address to the people was interrupted on a few occasions by the police anti-riot trucks. They're trucks with water cannons, which were jetting out water with such high pressure that they were knocking off their feet some of the demonstrators. And here is where some of the protesters tried to hit back. They threw stones, they threw all manner of things towards the trucks in a bid to stop them, which was not entirely successful, but hindered the police in one way or another. For instance, it made it very difficult for these trucks to keep on moving forward, when all kinds of missiles are flying at you. Now, we need to be careful here. The international media was capturing all this. And we know that water cannons are dangerous. They've resulted in deaths in other parts of the world, in fatalities. Sio maji tu, these things are dangerous, because the pressure with which that water comes out is deadly, can be deadly. And this is being directed at peaceful demonstrators, peaceful protesters. This is a crime against humanity. In case you didn't know, somebody can take this to the ICC, for instance, and get a hearing. Water cannons are supposed to be used as a last resort, against people who are being violent, demonstrators who are destroying property, etc., etc. These demonstrators were just peacefully listening to Raila Odinga. And although it is not right that they threw stones and all kinds of missiles at the trucks, the truth is they were provoked. And by the way, these water cannons caused damage to some of the businesses that were in this particular vicinity, where the police were trying to break up the crowds. Now there are those very impatient Azimio supporters who were very disappointed about yesterday. For instance, some of them felt the demonstrations should have continued for a few days to bring the government to its knees. There are those who felt that since the demonstrators did not access State House, the whole thing was a failure. Now this is where the character of legend patriot Raila Odinga kicks in. Because if the demonstrations continue for a few days, the people who will suffer most are the ordinary folks. You'll not be able to access food, for instance, because supply chains were not working yesterday. Everything in Kenya was at a standstill. Imagine that happening for 4 days continuously. It would be disaster. In my opinion, this is proof that Raila Odinga is wise and is not hungry for power immediately. Of course, some people criticize him for this. They say he's not hungry enough. And a person who's not hungry enough for power is unlikely to get it. And there's some truth in that. Unfortunately, but we need to recognize the human part of Raila Odinga. And in any case, the objectives can still be met with demonstrations once a week. Maybe later down the road, if need be, it can be increased to twice a week. If the Azimio fellows feel that once a week is not enough. Bottom line, we will still get there. Azimio will still be able to meet its objectives. And I believe the objective of a vast majority of Kenyans, to get a change of guard in Kenya. It will still work, although it will take a much longer time, but it will still work. But now comes another danger I see here, because the hungry, vast majority of Kenyans are already very impatient. The danger here is that the people can take this over. And of course that would mean total chaos. No control, no caring for anything. That is how bloody revolutions unfold, as we've seen in other parts of the world. And so, even as Azimio take a lot of criticism from short-sighted people, paid people, people who don't understand, watu ambao wamesoma mpaka wakakuwa you know what, they still have to be careful not to try the patience of their supporters. They have to be very careful about that, because the danger is real. It is very real, and it will affect all of us. Whether you're a UDA supporter or not, it will affect me and you and everybody, and not in a good way. Let's face reality. Now let's take a moment to look at what was happening on the government side. Clearly, the government is in panic. The tactics being used against Azimio protesters is clear evidence of that. The body language of the leaders is clear evidence of that. The way the leaders have changed their story. Now words like negotiating are creeping into their vocabulary. Have you noticed that? I don't know how long it will take for the government to realize that it is impossible to rule people who don't want you. Even a military dictatorship has to be very careful. Yeah, if people don't want you, kwisha maneno. It's just a matter of time. And this is a truism of this life, right down the history of mankind. Yeah, but of course we have some people in Kenya Kwanza who want to reinvent the wheel. Yeah, so let's see how far they go with that. My hope is that today in this video, I've given you a very in-depth analysis of what happened yesterday and the political implications going forward. Now, before I go, I need to remind you of my latest WAB offer. We have WAB number 102 in the works. Yeah, that includes a lot of behind the scenes manenos from yesterday, yeah, which I hope to release the day after tomorrow. However, the bad news is that my very special offer, yeah, the Mapambano WAB offer, will not be available the day after tomorrow. Indeed, it is ending today. Yeah, so please rush and take advantage of it. You can see details on the screens right now. All for a better Kenya. Folks, please, let's not be short-sighted. Let's have the vision of a giraffe, because you may be very comfortable today. Maybe even you have a government appointment. Maybe you're a CAS. Money is not an issue for you. Yeah, and going forward, money will not be an issue. But think about your children and the days, the weeks, the years, the decades to come.